The former president was found guilty this week of falsifying records to cover up a sex scandal in an historic turnaround from the commander-in-chief to convicted criminal. Trump, who pleaded not guilty and denied all 34 counts against him, rejected the verdict and said that the people would ultimately decide in November's election. And in a speech at Trump Tower, he said that there was no hush money. It was a normal non-disclosure agreement, properly categorised as a legal expense. Let's have a listen.
I'm doing something for this country, and I'm doing something for our Constitution. It's very important, far beyond me. And this can't be allowed to happen to other presidents. It should never be allowed to happen in the future. But this is far beyond me. This is bigger than Trump. This is bigger than me. This is bigger than my presidency.
Nothing's bigger than Trump, surely. He seems to think it's a stitch-up. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Trump the victim of a political hit job? Well, joining me now, Chair of Republicans Overseas, Swenson, lawyer and Dr. Gewolb, a former advisor to the Bank of England. Right, I'm going to start with you, Roger Gewolb. Is this some sort of stitch-up, as Trump is sort of alluding to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, we don't get the news over here that you can get in America. There's all sorts of signs of this being a rigged stitch-up, if you will. I mean, one glaring example is the Adult Survivors Act.
Which is what?
Which was adopted exactly 2 years ago by the New York legislature. It's a state law. And it says that if you were sexually abused, if you were raped 35 years ago, and you just remembered, you're barred by the statute of limitations, as you would be here, from bringing a civil suit. But the new Adult Survivors Act says, well, hey, I'll tell you what, if you bring that suit in the next 12 months, and only in the next 12 months, we'll let you do it.
Oh, really?
And that suit was enacted, everybody knows, solely so that the dreadful E. Jean Carroll could sue Trump for her claims of sexual abuse, and that then went on to defamation. They actually passed a state law allowing them to get somebody to stand up and sue him. The judge, Juan Merchan, in the court, did all sorts of things that were, I think, particularly wrong as far as witnesses go and other things that Trump should be allowed to do. He ran the court in a way that I feel, as an American lawyer, was prejudicial to any defendant. And the word is seeping through, it hasn't come here yet, the word is seeping through that the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, and those are not people that can be politically fixed very easily, they are really quite alarmed at this lawfare, as they're now calling it, legal warfare. So yes, it absolutely was a stitch-up, and as an American lawyer, I am disgusted that the legal system, I'm an officer of the court, I spent years studying this honorable profession, which is hundreds of years old, should be hijacked by some cheap politicians for their own ends.
Right, well, that's interesting, very strong stuff. Right, let's go to Swenson. He's the chair of Republicans Overseas. And we've also got Stephen Gill joining us as well. OK, Swenson, is this a stitch-up? You know, a lot of people saying it is.
I think that's an understatement, Anna. This was a political hit job from the get-go. You know, the several U.S. agencies turned down this case, notably including the Federal Election Commission, who found this was just not a case that they could try. Even Alvin Bragg turned it down at the beginning of this process. So the only reason they brought the indictment in the first place is because Trump was running for president. Do you think they'd care about a bookkeeping entry misdemeanor 8 years after the fact if Trump wasn't running for president? They sat on this evidence for 8 years. And then you had the rather conflicted judge that basically instructed the jury to convict. I don't blame the jury for this. They really were just following the instructions of the judge, who's obviously biased. So, this thing was a hit job from the get-go in April of 2023, when there never should have been an indictment. To indict a former president on a misdemeanor bookkeeping entry, it's appalling. It's a disgrace.
Steve Gill, your political commentator, what are your thoughts on this? Is this a political hit job?
100%. This is the most egregious abuse of justice since the Salem witch trials, and they weren't guilty either, just like Trump's not guilty. This bookkeeping error business is like if you went to the grocery store today to get some crisps and some beer and some sodas, for a party you were throwing and put it down on your check entry as groceries. And then because you're running for parliament 10 years from now, they say, oh, you were trying to cover up that you were buying beer at that point. That's how egregious this is. Nothing that Trump did was illegal. Even if you assume that the payoff to Stormy Daniels, that he was aware of it, that he knew of it, that's not illegal. And the jury, when they went through the check marks of finding him guilty, just clicked guilty with a check. They never even specified what the underlying crime was. The underlying crime would have had to have been a federal crime that a state court in New York has absolutely no jurisdiction or authority to pursue. This thing's going to be overturned on appeal, but it will take months, if not years, for that to happen. And the judge here, the DA, and I would not give a pass to the two jurors who are lawyers. They knew better. Bragg, Marchand, and those two lawyers should all be identified and disbarred because they knew better.
Well, some people might argue, though. I mean, I hear you, and I get it. A book entry error. You gave an example of something in a grocery store. This was £100,000, though, or 100 and whatever it is in dollars, $130,000. This was 100 grand. So people might look on that slightly differently, even though it is not illegal, by the way, to make a payment to somebody in that way as a hush money or whatever you term it as. But some people might argue that's quite a bit of money. I'll go to you, Greg. You know.
Yeah, I don't think that's relevant, Nana. I mean,
Yeah.
it's whether it was 100,000 or 100 million, it's not illegal. You might not like the fact that he was making a payment, but non-disclosure agreements are perfectly legal. John Edwards, the former senator who ran for president, paid one of his mistresses with campaign money, and they decided that was illegal.
Yeah,
and he had to pay it back, right? Now, and then, of course, Hillary Clinton paid for the Steele dossier with campaign money. That was illegal because it's not a valid campaign expense. But when Trump made the payment, it was not from campaign funds. In fact, they tried to make it, tie in this felony count because it should have been a campaign fund. No, absolutely not. If he had used campaign funds, we'd know about it. They would try him for that. He'd have another felony conviction. It's completely obscene.
So if this is the case, Roger, and, we did struggle to find people who were prepared to say that he's not been stitched up. So, that is why you have seen most of the people on the panel are saying the same thing. We did struggle to find people who didn't think it was a stitch up, just given the evidence that is there. Roger, I'm going to ask you then, why is it that this is happening? Because it seems, if it is a stitch-up, as it appears, and most people think it is, why is this happening?
Well, it's not being said here, but, as an American and a Brit who's been here a long time, it's very different, the perception. In America, lawyers run the place, okay? Here, accountants run the place, and the solicitor's somebody you go to for the paperwork. In America, the law and lawyers, when I get stopped by a traffic cop in Chicago, he refers to me as counselor, out of respect, okay? Lawyers run the thing, and everybody in the big game, the big players, throw their lawyer in somebody's face at the first signs of an argument. So lawsuits and charges and convictions and all these kind of things and indictments are not the shock to Americans that they are here. Here, your neighbor gets called to magistrate's court and everybody starts sweating. It's a different mentality. And in that mentality, which is so litigious and where people are always banging each other over the head with lawyers, you use anything you can. So yes, as you've just been discussing this $130,000, how much money do you think that Donald Trump and everybody else in the construction and property business in Manhattan pays to groups that I won't mention by name to get things done? But that's how it works. It's no big deal. But if a smart lawyer can grab it and use it, he's going to. But here, it gets seen as an absolute parliamentary fact, whereas it's just tactics.
Yeah, but look, Steve, finally to you, if it is that transparent and that obvious that it is some sort of hit job, as it would appear, most people are saying this, we have looked to find people who think differently, how can they get away with it?
Well, they won't get away with it legally once the Court of Appeals, the legitimate courts, have a chance to stand in. Let me say one thing about the lawyers. There's a saying in the United States that if you're in business, lawyers are like nuclear weapons. Everybody has to have them, but everything gets screwed up if anybody uses one. And I think that's what we see time and time again. And it's interesting that he mentioned he gets stopped by a traffic cop and they call him counselor. Judge Marchand is a traffic judge. He's been an acting judge at the level he's at for 14 years. Now, you do a great job at your job, but if you'd been an acting host for 15 years, I'd say you probably sucked at your job. This guy is a hit job. He was put here to get the hit down. He ought to be disbarred for what he's done. The Court of Appeals will sort it out, but they're going to get their Trump convicted headline for the next 6 months.
Okay.
That's all they want.
Well, we'll keep watching. We'll keep waiting to see what actually happens as a result of that. So we're running
Can
out
I
of
just
time.
say, thank goodness GB News is bringing this out where no one else is?
Well, we are waiting. I mean, look, as soon as we hear somebody who says something different, who has something else to contribute, if you're listening or watching and you don't believe it is a hit job, please get in touch. gbnews.com/your say. Thank you very much.